Hey, beautiful people, this episode covers how to show innovation in an interview. We're going to explore how to showcase innovation as a practice, not just as outcomes. I'm going to show you how to use my 6-step practice model to structure your innovation stories. We're going to look at why most candidates talk about innovation wrong and how you can get it right. The surprising link between listening and the innovation capacity, and what interviewers are actually listening for when they ask about innovation capacity. By the end of the video, I want you to be able to see how to structure your innovation stories using the 6-step practice model. In my book, The Innovation Mindset, I talk about a 6-step practice model. And here's why that's important, is as we think about innovation, we think about innovation as being exclusively ideation. So if you go to Google, you type in what is innovation and you look at images, you get pages and pages and pages of light bulbs. So we've been a little bit brainwashed to think about innovation as being light bulbs going off in brilliant people's heads. And that doesn't always necessarily include us. So one of the things that I would really encourage you to do is to start thinking about innovation pretty differently than just the ideation, just the light bulb piece of it. The chief scientist at Toyota Motor Corporation very kindly gave me an endorsement at the front of my book, totally fabulous, and said, "I strongly recommend the innovation mindset to anyone who wants to learn how to do the more challenging part of innovation, the transformation by human teams of inventions into innovation." So Dr. Gil Pratt is the chief scientist of Toyota Motor Corporation. He's also the CEO of Toyota Research Institute. So the man knows about innovation. And what he's pointing to there is he's pointing to the knowledge that the ideation process in of itself is never enough to really bring an innovation to market. And an innovation is, we're defining now an innovation not as something fantastic that sits in a lab that we can ooh and ah at, but something that actually impacts the practices of a community, something that has come to market and has allowed all of us, all of humanity, to be able to derive value from it. One of the innovations of our time is, of course, the good old phone, the smartphone. I'm in favour of an iPhone, but the smartphone, and that's a huge innovation for us. It allows us to be able to do things as human beings that we have never been able to do before. And so when you think about innovation, think about it as something that we bring to market that builds new practices in communities. You and I have radically different practices around how we coordinate, how we communicate, how we share knowledge, how we share information, how we engage with each other, how we share cat photos based on our smartphones. So when we think about innovation, think of it as a practice. When you start looking at how to show innovation in an interview, one of the important things to do is not to say, I produce this innovation, I produce this innovation. I mean, if you have your name on a whole bunch of patents, absolutely talk about that. That's incredibly valuable. But what they're also going to be looking for is they're going to be looking for your ability to be able to bring innovations to communities in a way that shifts the practices of those communities and in a way that those innovations are perceived as incredibly valuable for a large group of people. The 6-step practice model is actually a framework for thinking about how you talk about innovation in an interview. And here's why. Because the first step in a 6-step practice model of innovation is actually to distinguish, to be able to see something differently maybe than other people do, or to be able to observe something that allows you to be able to move differently in an organization and potentially add more value. So what opportunity or challenge did you notice when you did something that was very innovative, or you led an innovation team to deliver something incredibly valuable? Now, the other thing to remember in here is your innovation does not necessarily have to be the iPhone. It doesn't have to be a groundbreaking innovation that impacts billions of people. It can simply be an innovative improvement to something that's already happening in your organization. So I invite you to move your understanding of innovation away from simply the groundbreaking product that impacts billions of people to a continuous process of improvement, moving into innovation, because you have to start somewhere. If you're starting with talking about innovation in interviews, then what you're doing is you're really talking about what is referred to as incremental innovation, and you're working your way up to the groundbreaking or moonshot innovation. So when we look at distinguish and we say, what is the opportunity or challenge that you noticed? Do you have an example of one of those that you saw in your career that you would be happy to talk about in an interview, framed in this way that I'm talking about innovation? If you have it, drop it down in the comments. Let's get the conversation started around how it is that you're all thinking of yourselves as powerful, innovative leaders, and how you talk about your innovation capacity in interviews. Second step is observe. What patterns revealed innovation potential? So as you work yourself through your story around how you're going to talk about your own innovation capacity in an interview, or the innovation capacity of your team in an interview, you're distinguishing that there is a challenge or an opportunity that you noticed. And then what you're doing is you're observing patterns that revealed the innovation potential. So think about it this way. If you're working doing an incredible collaboration around, say, a medical device discovery, and you're setting up your clinical trials for that medical device, and you have identified that your team are constantly pulled in at the last minute and expected to perform absolute miracles in order to be able to move along that regulatory compliance arc. Your innovation might be something as simple as saying, I'd like to do a design session with the regulatory team before we launch this entire project, and I'd like to look at what are our touch points that we're going to engage with you on. Now, mostly those conversations are had out of blame and shame and people's frustration. If you can move yourself to the point where you're looking to cultivate innovation together as opposed to blame or shame someone, you're going to start having different kinds of conversations. And you're also going to go into that conversation ready to make an offer to the regulatory team as to how it is you can engage more effectively and what's in it for them if you actually do. The third one is to practice courage, which in the example I just gave you requires that you practice courage. This is, to me, one of the most important things in this process. You can distinguish and you can observe all you like, but if you don't practice courage and actually take action, what you're doing is you're missing out on the power of your ability to distinguish and observe. Practicing courage is setting up that meeting. Practicing courage is designing the offer you're going to make to them. Practicing courage is not focusing on the blame and shame, but focusing on the innovation opportunity that serves both of you. Once you start doing that, what you're doing is you're opening the door for what I refer to as co-invention. And I don't talk about it as collaboration or co-creation, because co-invention is actually the process of building on top of each other's ideas in an environment where you're not doing a whole ton of judgment around the ideas, because that shuts some of it down, but you're building on top of each other's ideas in a way that allows you to be able to solve big problems or pursue big opportunities. And co-invention needs to be built on a basis of trust. So part of what you're doing in here is, by doing the distinguish, observe, practice courage, you're beginning to create trust immediately. Making offers begins to create trust immediately. And you're breaking out of the normal patterns of acrimony and aggression that happen between departments, particularly in organizations that work in silos. So when you're talking about this in an interview, what you're doing is you're showing up as a leader, you're showing up as someone who listens, you're showing up as someone who makes offers, someone who's a self-starter, and you're showing up as someone who doesn't live in the blame and shame game, but someone who's actually interested in building and co-inventing together. And you can actually use those terms and people will understand what you're talking about. In the process of co-inventing, you're going to create knowledge. You're going to create organizational knowledge, both for yourself, both for your internal customer, and for your respective teams. Now they have different ways of engaging, different ways of thinking about things, and bring it forward to them as a practice that you want to continue to pursue over time and in various different situations and circumstances. Then you lay the foundation for really innovating together. What I have found over the years is that if I'm able to work through this process where I'm distinguishing, observing, practicing courage, and creating knowledge, I'm creating a foundation for me to be able to innovate, because now I understand the other person's concerns, I understand their business well enough, I understand what they're trying to accomplish and how they go about doing it, because I've been working in this co-inventive way with them, as have my people, and I've made offers to them and they've made offers back to me, and we now have this level of trust that we didn't have before. I've created a foundation for true innovation to happen. And those innovations begin to happen when you're shooting the breeze, when you're speculating, when you're having lunch, when you're going for a drink after work. I'm not suggesting that you drink after work, but when you go out together after work. And what happens in there is that you begin to create a situation, an environment, a relationship where you can actually create innovations together. You are moving from inventions to creating innovations, and true leadership, true innovation leadership, comes from your ability to be able to do exactly that. As you start thinking about how you talk about this in interviews, strongly recommend that you look at the 6-step practice model, and that will give you a framework, the one that we've just walked through, to allow you to be able to talk about your innovation in interviews. And I also recommend that you take my innovation readiness assessment. It's not necessarily an assessment of you individually, it's an assessment of your team or your organization, but it'll give you a scorecard at the end of it and give you an idea how to be able to think about innovation differently from how you may have been thinking about it in the past. It's Innovation Readiness Assessment, www.innovationreadinessassessment.com. It's down below in the comments. It's totally free. Do it. Let me know how it works for you. And I wish you the absolute best of luck on your innovation journey. It's really good and fun.